Most men have been in a room where someone said almost nothing, and somehow, by the end, everyone remembered him. Not because he performed, not because he competed. He simply existed in a way that made the noise around him feel unnecessary. You've seen this man. You recognized something in him without being able to name it. But here is what most men never examine. That silence isn't always what it appears to be. Some men are quiet because they have genuinely arrived somewhere. Others are quiet because silence became the one place they couldn't be hurt. From the outside, these two men are identical. From the inside, one is free, the other is still guarding. The brutal reality of silent power is not that it's rare, it's that most men who believe they possess it have never honestly examined which version they're actually living. There is a particular kind of man who does something unusual in group conversations. He simply does not compete for the space. Others are filling silences, building on each other's sentences, angling for the next opening to speak. He sits with the conversation rather than inside it. And without any visible effort, without a single strategic move, something in the room begins to orient toward him. Not loudly, not immediately, but it happens. It always happens. Most men have observed this dynamic and felt something they couldn't quite name. Not envy exactly, something quieter than that, a recognition. The psychological mechanism beneath it is rarely discussed with any precision. People instinctively assign value based on scarcity. This is not a theory, it is woven into how human attention actually operates. A man who speaks constantly trains the people around him to half listen. His words arrive so frequently that the mind learns to process them at reduced volume. But a man whose words come infrequently, delivered without urgency, without the subtle anxiety of needing to be heard, those words land differently. The room hasn't just heard him, it has waited for him. This is passive gravity, not performed, not engineered in the moment, just present. And here is where the dark psychology of male social behavior becomes interesting. The moment most men recognize this pattern, something quietly breaks in them, because recognition feels like proximity to the thing itself. They begin to speak less, they practice restraint, they sit back a little further in conversations, hold eye contact a beat longer, respond slower than they used to. The behavior is almost correct, almost. But there is a tell, and the people around them feel it. Not consciously, not in a way they could articulate, but they feel it. Performed restraint has a texture that natural restraint does not. The man who is genuinely unbothered does not need you to notice his stillness. He is not watching for your reaction to it. But a man performing restraint, performing what he believes is silent power, has already chosen his audience before the scene begins. His composure arrives precisely when it is most visible. It intensifies under observation. It becomes, quietly, a statement. That is the first tell. Genuine equanimity does not perform on cue. The second tell is more interior and far more uncomfortable. The man projecting calm is often working harder than the man visibly reacting. His stillness is a project. His silence requires maintenance. And beneath that maintenance, beneath the careful architecture of appearing unmoved, lives exactly the thing the performance was designed to conceal, the need to be perceived as not needing anything. This is the psychological inversion most men who study the male mindset never fully confront. The performance of indifference is still, at its core, a response to other people's perception. The man who has spent years constructing the appearance of not caring what others think has, in constructing it, made managing their perception the central project of his inner life. Think of two men in a tense exchange. One stays quiet. At first, the quietness reads as composure, but watch it longer. Notice the slight timing of it, the way the silence lands just when it will be felt most. Notice the awareness in the eyes that does not match the relaxed posture. Something is being managed. The stillness is not an absence of something. It is a presence, strategy dressed as peace. Real equanimity, the kind that comes from having genuinely resolved something inside, does not need moments of high visibility to confirm itself. It is not waiting for pressure to arrive so it can demonstrate what it looks like under pressure. It does not deepen when eyes are on it. Performed composure does. Most men who have studied psychology, social dominance, or emotional discipline recognize this pattern quickly. The harder recognition, the one that arrives later, usually in a quiet moment with no audience, is not about someone else. A man can spend years believing his composure was strength, and only years later, in a brutal moment of honesty, begin to wonder whether the stillness was real or whether it was always, at some level, waiting to be seen. That question, once arrived at, does not leave easily. There is a kind of quiet that costs nothing, and there is a kind of quiet that costs everything, that requires constant maintenance, careful management, a steady internal vigilance most men never name, because naming it would mean it exists.
From the outside, both look the same. Two men in a room, neither reactive, neither loud, both seemingly composed. But composure is not always the same thing as stillness, and most men, if they are honest, already know the difference. They have felt it. The man who became quiet after genuine growth does not need to monitor his silence. It simply exists. It does not guard anything. It does not brace for impact. There is a kind of psychological abundance in how he inhabits restraint, as though the silence is not armor, but open space, something he arrived at, not something he constructed. The other man became quiet after hurt. Not dramatically, not in some single defining moment. He learned gradually that speaking openly invited exposure, that vulnerability was studied rather than received, that reaction gave other people a handhold. So he withdrew. He cultivated stillness not as the fruit of some interior development, but as a defense mechanism so practiced that it eventually began to feel like a personality. This is not a failure. It is a very human response to a very real experience. Most men who discovered the value of emotional restraint did not find it through philosophy. They found it through loss. But there is a cost to that kind of silence, a hidden one. The man whose restraint was built around a wound cannot fully inhabit the calm he projects. Some part of him is still alert, still scanning, still waiting for the moment the silence might be tested, might be broken, might be turned against him. His discipline is real, but it is tethered, and tethered discipline is not freedom. It is a longer leash. Here is the distinction that never gets named. Silence built on avoidance requires maintenance, because the thing being avoided does not stop existing, it simply waits. It emerges in small ways, in a response that came out sharper than intended, in a discomfort that surfaces in moments of genuine intimacy, in the faint exhaustion a man feels after spending time with someone who asked the wrong question. Silence built on genuine stillness requires nothing, it simply is. The question worth sitting with, and this is not a comfortable one, is which kind of silence you have been carrying. Not in public, not in environments where restraint performs a social function, but alone, in a quiet room, when there is no dynamic to navigate, no observation to manage, no one watching. What does the silence feel like then? Most men who have benefited from emotional discipline have never fully asked themselves this. They have examined their silence as others experience it. They have studied its effect on rooms, on conversations, on the perception of authority. But the interior question, what is this silence actually protecting, tends to go unasked. because answering that requires a different kind of courage than staying quiet ever did. The armor and the man wearing it can look identical for a very long time. There is a man who has already done the work. He is not performing silence. He has examined that impulse and moved past it. He understands the difference between stillness worn as armor and stillness that requires no defense. He has sat with the distinction long enough that it no longer feels like a distinction. It simply feels like how he is. And yet, what does a man carry forward once he has named the thing? This is not a question about integrity. It is a question about the structure of consciousness itself and the particular condition that self-awareness creates in men who take it seriously. There is a version of genuine calm that exists before a man has thought about it, before someone told him that quiet authority shifts a room, before he encountered the idea that emotional restraint creates influence in ways that emotional reactivity cannot, before he understood that the man who does not need the group's attention is frequently the one the group watches. That version, the one that existed before he named it, was whole in a way the current version cannot be. Because once a man learns the architecture of something, he cannot unknow it. He enters the room the same way. He sits. He listens before speaking. He responds without urgency. From the outside, nothing has changed, but something has been added. The knowledge is now in the room with him. Here is the specific irony available only to men who think carefully. The instant a man learns that authentic behavior carries more weight than performed behavior, authenticity itself becomes something he can perform. Not deliberately, not cynically, but the awareness is present. He catches it sometimes, that faint moment of recognition when his restraint lands somewhere. A pause in conversation, a room that tilts slightly towards him. He notices, not with pride, yes, exactly, but with something. There is a name for this, though it rarely gets one. The Watcher. Every man who understands psychological discipline eventually grows a watcher, a part of him that monitors whether he is being genuine. And the Watcher, by its nature, is never fully at rest. It cannot be. Its function is observation. Observation requires a small, continuous separation between the man and his behavior. This is not a character flaw. It is the unavoidable cost of self-knowledge.
A man reading a message and then choosing not to respond. He doesn't respond out of strategy. He doesn't respond because he genuinely doesn't feel the urgency. That much is true. But somewhere in that moment, he is aware that not responding is a form of power. These two things coexist. They are not in conflict. That is precisely what makes this so difficult to resolve, because it does not need to be resolved. It simply needs to be seen. The man who has not yet reached this understanding believes that authenticity is a destination, that if he works long enough, he will arrive somewhere without performance, without self-monitoring, without any residue of the mind watching itself. He will not arrive there, not because he is failing, but because the self that pursues stillness keeps becoming aware of the pursuit. The goal, if there is one, is not to eliminate the watcher, it is to hold it lightly, to notice the noticing without urgency, without shame, without the additional burden of needing to fix it. The man who sees his own watching is standing one floor closer to the real thing than the man who believes he has already arrived. That distinction is not small. It is, in fact, the only honest place to stand. There is a man you have already seen. He is in a room. He is not speaking, and somehow, without strategy, without performance, the room is quietly aware of him. You have watched men like this. You may have been one in moments you did not recognize at the time. Silent power is not something a man builds and then keeps. It is not a permanent condition. It is a direction, chosen, lost, chosen again, and the losing of it is not failure, it is part of what makes it real. The men who come closest to genuine stillness are not the ones who have resolved every contradiction within themselves. They are the ones who have learned to hold the questions without letting the holding become noise. This is the brutal reality no framework will hand you. Awareness is not the same as arrival. And now, quietly, without announcement, that question has moved. It no longer belongs to the screen or to the idea of some other man in some other room. It belongs to you. You have been in that room. You already know which version of yourself was there.